Well, hello, friends. Ryan here, professional life coach, Enneagram educator, and your host for this episode of Fourward Bound with the Enneagram. You know, the Enneagram is a powerful tool for building understanding, compassion, and achieving growth in our lives, grounded by 9 types or ways that our personalities and egos are structured. The conversations in this podcast are designed to illuminate the Enneagram in action by hearing directly from individuals who are working with the Enneagram and their type in their lives. The views reflected in these conversations are personal, and so what one person shares may not be true for all others who identify as their particular Enneagram type, and that's okay. My encouragement: listen with compassionate curiosity. Thanks for being with us. So today we are hanging out with Enneagram Type 8. The 8 is often referred to as the protector, and our guest today is my friend Anne, who identifies as an Enneagram Type 8. Anne, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and honored that you asked me.
Well, I'm honored that you said yes. How are you feeling about being on the old podcast today?
Well, I'm good. At first, I was a little nervous, and then I kept getting distracted by other things, and my daughter called and that type thing, which was probably good because it redirected my focus, and then all of a sudden it was time for this. So
and so here we are. All right,
here
awesome.
we are.
Well, Anne, I want to quickly get into a conversation with you and what your experience of the 8 is. But first, would it be okay if I offer our friends who are listening just a little bit of an overview and a grounding of the type?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, thanks. Let's take a look together at Enneagram Type 8, often referred to as the protector. We start by looking at the instinctual center of intelligence for the type. This could be heart, head, or body. As a body-center type, the Type 8 leads with this sense of strength and ability, a physical embodiment that is instinctual, arising from their gut center. For Type 8, this is about the core of the body as a fueling station for action and generating results. The protector embodies a worldview that is about meeting the world head-on. They see the world as a tough place, the unfolding of events, people, and situations as something that could take away our power or create unfavorable conditions. Type 8s often wrestle with feelings around guilt, this notion that something is fundamentally wrong and that someone or something is to blame. A belief system develops for Type 8. The sense that by showing and exerting strength and power, protection of self and others can be assured, and that positive regard will follow. That by personally taking action, whatever is missing can be restored, or whatever is wrong or about to go wrong can be resolved. And so 2 primary driving attentions emerge for Type 8. We'll refer to those as anger and lust. First, let's look at anger. This is not necessarily an externally focused or aggressive position, but rather this heated internal response at whatever the protector perceives needs to be addressed. For the protector, this is often about injustice, unfairness, deceit, or manipulation, either of themselves or others, especially those who are innocent or weak. While they're driven by this internal fire, Type 8s can present in myriad ways, ranging from warm and friendly to direct, intimidating, and confrontational. The results they generate ranging from inspirational justice to personal revenge. And now let's look at lust. In short, it is this notion that the fire never seems to burn out, this insatiable appetite for intensity, stimulation, and power. For Type 8, it is often all or nothing, and the energy can show up as my way or the highway. The protector is drawn to high-impact situations, willing to take bold action to get the desired results. Now we look at what we call the virtue for the type, this highest expression of their potential. Think of it as keeping all the gifts for the type, and then also uncovering or remembering a piece of truth that has been forgotten along the way. For type 8, we refer to the virtue as innocence, a state of being that is unencumbered by fear, anger, or self-doubt, a quality of open-heartedness, trust even. The work here about becoming vulnerable with their own places of weakness, or even erasing the duality between strong and weak altogether. Type 8s are supported in doing this work by remembering and believing with comfort and confidence the holy truth that all is unfolding in a natural way according to a natural plan, without the need to exert control or strength to fix it. So, this is just a place for us to start, and I want to get your voice in on this and say from the outset, everything I said just now, like all of it may not resonate, maybe some of it does. For folks who are listening, maybe all of it, some of it. We are not caricatures. We are complex, developed people. And so for now, the next 25 minutes or so, we want to prioritize and your experience with the 8. So I'm going to turn it over to you with just a pretty open-ended question to get us started off with. Like, what's being an 8 like for you, Anne?
Well, to be honest, Ryan, I had never heard of the Enneagram until I took my first class a few years ago.
Yeah.
And once I figured out what my type was, it kind of helped a lot of things make sense for me, just about my personality, the way I handle things well, the way I don't handle some things well at all, the things that I feel like I am good at with my job, within relationships, that type thing. I had a very dear friend give me years ago a little pillow that said, "I'm not bossy, I just have better ideas." And I kind of took it and laughed and, oh yeah, ha, ha, ha. But inside I was a little, I was slightly offended. I thought, well, I'm not bossy, like I'm not always trying to throw my ideas out as the better idea. Now in hindsight, that can be an 8. That can be a good synopsis of an 8. Not seeing themselves as being bossy, but just thinking that we have ideas that might be better in certain circumstances. And so learning about the 8 and the characteristics of the 8 have been very helpful to me. And this practice of utilizing the Enneagram really is something that I have learned to do. I don't always do it well every day in life, but I try to as much as I can, particularly if I feel like I'm in a situation or I'm in a conversation that I may feel is veering a little off course and I'm becoming a little too heavy-handed with it. Then I can stop and check myself.
Well, I love that one of the things that you mentioned there just in that opening, Anne, was an acknowledgement of that there are things that you do really well. And there are situations where you just organically and authentically show up really well. And that's as much a part of your 8 as situations where maybe there's a little bit of work to do to get to better or different results. And so can we spend just a minute? I'd love to hear just in your words, what are some of those things? What are the gifts of the 8 as you experience it in your life?
Some of the things that I do well and have, I think, done well for most of my adult life is being very detail-oriented, very organized. I loved being a student. And I have said many times, if I could have made money, had a career being a professional student, I would have done that. And I taught college for many years, college English. I love that. So I like that idea of learning and finding out new things and passing that knowledge on to other people and learning from other people. Yeah, part of teaching for me was learning as much from my students as it was for what I was hopefully able to impart to them. So that has been huge for me. And when I look back on my job choices, teaching requires a lot of attention to detail, a lot of focus, organization. I have been a volunteer coordinator in one position where I managed all the volunteers for a nonprofit. Same thing. I went into the organization as their first full-time volunteer coordinator. And so it was like revamping the program and getting it up and running. I have been an executive assistant to very high level executives in the nonprofit sector. And that takes a lot of trust for someone to have an assistant on that level that they just know, well, I can just ask Ann to do this and she's going to do it. And I'm not going to worry about it. And then I have had a job where I went to a local community college and started their alumni program. So from the ground up. So all of those attributes, I think of the 8 that we've talked about have been very helpful. And to do any of those things, you have to have this impulse. I don't know if it's impulse, this drive to be in control.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, that's actually, I doodled a note to myself as you were talking. It's like, students, volunteers, frankly, even executives. I mean, like you've been in positions where there were people that needed wrangling.
Hurting,
hurting, wrangling, and whether they knew it or not. I mean, that's an interesting thing to look at because, how I'm assuming volunteers, volunteers are donors in many ways. They're donating their time. And so it's like that needs to be handled with a certain amount of respect and savvy, just like working with an executive does. But it's like, but you are showing up in those positions as someone who knows how to take the reins and get us where we need to go. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say that's very fair. Yes. And being an 8 is helpful with that.
And so say just a word or two more about in and speak. How is being an 8 helpful there?
In and speak? Because I know what I'm doing.
I love it.
And sometimes I do have better ideas. Part of being an 8, sometimes it's a challenge to listen to other ideas. But as I have grown older and evolved and working on the Enneagram, I am teaching myself to be a good listener, to be a better listener, to hear those other ideas without think, well, no, my idea is the best and this is the way we do it. Or not having my idea be the one that we go with and not being pissed off about it.
And I want to get into that in just a second. This, like, if it's not your idea and how does that land? But one of the things that you just said that I'd love to revisit, and like you said, you said and speak, and I said, yeah, sure. And you were like, because I know what I'm doing. So can we go back to that for just a second? Like, and you're right, Anne. Like, you and I have worked together. You do know what you're doing. So I mean, that's not like that's not smoke. When you say to me, because I know what I'm doing, where do you feel that in your body?
Physically, literally?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know that I've ever even considered that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the opposite, when things aren't right, is in my gut.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, but, the anger.
Or just things not being right. I don't know, Ryan. That's something I need to ponder on.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. It comes permission to make an observation.
Yeah.
it comes off to me, just the energy of it is just so matter of fact.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, my projection of that is that it also is coming from a pretty gut place.
Probably so.
It is just organic, embodied knowingness because
Hmm.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I will say to you, as someone who lives in the heart center, there is something very attractive about the grounded embodiment of just gutturally saying, because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say,
It's a good feeling to be
yeah,
able to say that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when, I'm gonna give you an example, a little bit of
All
a
right.
scenario.
Yeah.
So I don't know, there's a decision that needs to be made. Maybe we'll say it needs to be made at work. There's a bunch of cooks in the kitchen. There's been a bunch of ideas floating around about what the best way to handle the course of action is, and you've gotten in there and said your piece because I think you probably would in
Hmm.
whatever the situation was.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, a different decision was made, and I'm going to take it one step further and say it didn't pan out. It didn't work out. The ever loving crap hit the fan. What's your experience in that situation?
I told you so. If
Yeah,
you just listened in the first place, I
yeah,
mean, that would be my reaction. Would that be my obvious reaction to everybody? I don't know. But
yeah,
to myself and to a few,
yeah,
close people in the room, yeah, if they just
yeah,
listened to begin with.
yeah.
And honestly, when you ask me that, like I hate for things to not go well because I want things to go well,
Of course.
obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But sometimes I'm like, it's what you get for not for not paying attention to the scenario or whatever it is to begin with. And
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe sometimes I feel and this is terrible to admit, but it's true. I feel a little bit of like, well, good for me because it would have been right if we'd done it my way.
yeah,
But that's
yeah,
pretty honest right there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And does this language I used earlier on around anger, does that
Mhm.
resonate? Like, is anger an association that you would make in those instances?
I've gotten to where in those types of instances, maybe not so much anger as just, I, I mean, how many times a day, sometimes, depending on where I am, do I say, what a fucking idiot? And it's more of that, just like it's out of my hands. What an idiot.
Yeah,
And just realizing that's what I'm dealing with
yeah,
and trying to learn from it and move on.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to revisit, like in the mix of this, something that you said just a minute ago, which is I don't want things to mess up.
No,
It's like, and so your response may be like, what an idiot, and well, you get what you get. But truthfully, like you don't want
no,
to be part of something that's failing.
no, not at all.
Like,
Not
talk
at
about
all.
what does that feel like? I mean, if you're part of something that you knew it could be avoided, you had ideas, you had contributions, and then you see that the thing is crumbling. It's like, how does that make you feel that the thing
Very
is crumbling?
frustrated.
Yeah,
Very frustrated. Yeah,
yeah,
very frustrated. And those kind of things happen just every day in the world. But at work or with friends, it's very, very frustrating. And so then for me, it becomes a matter of how can I address the situation without resorting to anger or I told you so
yeah, yeah,
or what an idiot,
yeah.
that type of thing. Yeah, it's
And
very frustrating.
over the course of your years, and does the way you respond in those situations look the same? Like, how does it look differently than maybe it did? you decide how far back, or has that been a pretty consistent approach for you throughout your life?
No, I think that I used to get angry
Oh
more
yeah,
often, yeah,
yeah,
beforehand. And it may not have been, a right now in your face kind of
mm-hmm.
anger, but stewing on it, chewing on it,
Yeah,
letting it get me all worked up inside.
yeah,
Uh, that used to be much more of an issue for me than
yeah,
it is now. And I
yeah.
don't know if that just comes with being older, and now I'm just like, whatever, you know. But
Or maybe you're getting
honestly,
comfortable with
but
innocence.
right. And that could be it. When you were talking about that, it did make me think about that. This is just the way it is. And I've done what I can do. But at this
Yeah.
point, it's just got to happen the way it's going to happen. I like working with people who, for example, in the event that you and I just recently worked on together with a
Mm-hmm.
group of people to put together, I loved working with that group
Mm-hmm.
because everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody had a job. Everybody did their job. I wasn't worried that somebody else wasn't going to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed different ideas. Sometimes people liked an idea I threw out, and sometimes they liked somebody else's idea, but it was fine because it was a great group of organized people who had the same vision,
Mm-hmm.
working together to make an event that was a success. That
Yeah.
was a great experience for me.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah. So when it goes the opposite way, yeah, it just gets very frustrating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm curious, I'm going to pivot just a little bit. What was your experience like coming to identify as an Enneagram Type 8? I know you said that you were in a class to do that, but I guess what I'm curious to say it another way is like, did you see the Type 8 and go, yep, that's me? Or was there some resistance or wrestling or considering other types? What was that experience like?
At first, I thought I might be a two,
Yeah.
um, which is that what eights resonate
Yep.
to a two,
Yep.
because I like to help people.
Yep.
But when you think about that part of a two, and then the eights who are all about justice, justice for all at whatever level,
Yeah.
that plays very well into that.
Yeah.
So at first I thought I was a two, but then it didn't take me real long to realize that I was an eight. As I came to understand, maybe there aren't tons of eights generally, at
Mm-hmm.
least who go through the classes that I went through,
Mm-hmm.
or people identify not necessarily themselves as an eight, but their spouses or their partners or coworkers, somebody else. Oh, well, they're an eight. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason they think they're an eight is because they're bossy and can be irrational and get angry.
Yeah.
And that's not always true
Right.
at all.
Right.
And so I had to think about it in terms of what can make a good eight
Yeah.
as opposed to the stereotypical eight.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you shared just now, and I think it's really helpful for folks who are listening and who are considering what their own type is. A couple things stand out for me from what you just shared. It makes a lot of sense that someone could be considering the connection, am I a two or am I an eight? These two numbers are really closely connected. Two is actually the growth point for type eight. And so someone who is an eight might look at the type 2 and see a lot of things that are really attractive there,
Mhm.
and that like almost sense of aspiration and longing for those types could be part of what that
Right.
is. The other thing that I think is probably really true for you is you've had some time in the in life, in the workspace. You're no longer, like many of us aren't, a caricature of a type.
Mhm.
And so you've learned different ways to navigate different situations, and that can cause you to go, well, maybe I'm this or maybe I'm that.
Mhm.
And so I think, checking in with things with that insight is also a helpful thing to do.
Yeah, very much so.
That maybe a last question, and then I want to give you time to share anything else that might be on your mind. What do you think, folks? We've talked a little bit about you just mentioned about the bad rap that sometimes the eight gets. Um, you know, what do you think folks maybe are misunderstanding if they know just a little bit, but not the whole story about the eight? Maybe they live with someone who they think is an eight. Maybe they have a coworker who they believe or know is an eight. What do you think it's most likely that folks are misunderstanding about their type eight friends?
Eights aren't perpetually angry or bossy. I think we can come across that way. And I think a lot of that has to do with what you and I were just discussing earlier when I said, I know what I'm doing. It can come across as being, all about myself, but I just know frequently what I like and what I don't like, what I feel strongly about, what I don't feel strongly about. I don't have to sit around and consider it for days and weeks and months and years. I just somehow, as you said, innately know those things. So I don't mind sharing those. And I think that can take people aback sometimes, but it's not meant to be, so that's it, that it's my way or the highway. A lot of times when I say things like that, I can tell my children would say, Mom, and I would be like, what? I was just saying something. And they say, it's not what you're saying, it's your tone. Mm-hmm. So that's been something else for me to be cognizant of, is my tone, because sometimes saying, well, I know what I'm doing can sound very conceited. But it's a level of confidence there, and it's okay to be confident because, as I said, I was nervous about doing this. So it's not always, yes, I'm in charge of every single thing and I'm in charge of it well. That idea of passion too, for me, has displayed itself, I think, one of the ways being a teacher. Because I really always cared very much about my students, both inside and outside of the classroom, depending upon what they had going on in their lives. I have focused a lot of my time over the years with animal welfare and rescue because that's very important to me. So that is an area where I like to look after things and take care of things and try to support those things, the cultural sector, anything like that. So I've worked in nonprofit literally my entire life. I've never had a job that was a for-profit job, like working as a bank executive or working in a bank or working in any corporation, anything like that. And so that to me is pretty reflective of what an eight can represent. And I think that if you are in that field, those areas, whatever it is you are rallying the cause for, animals, children, the cultural sector, arts, whatever it is, you have to have that kind of a personality to try to push things through, or it's not going to happen.
And so last question, just thinking about, folks who are listening that, we'll just use the example that, they live with someone who they believe is an eight and they're picking up on some of the behaviors and the, the personality traits or characteristics that we've talked about. And you've touched on some of what those things are that you think get maybe sometimes unfairly labeled. What's your advice for that person on how to more effectively navigate those situations with the type 8 in their life?
That's a great question. And it's one that I have pondered on. And one of the main things that I have come to realize, and I think this is true for 8s, we don't like to guess. I don't want to guess what you're thinking. I don't want to guess if you want to go to dinner or not. If I say, do you want to go out to dinner? And you say, well, whatever you want to do, that's not answering my question. Do you want to go out to dinner? That's what I want to know. And if you say yes, I'm going to say okay. And if you say no, I'm going to say okay.
Okay.
Because I don't want to try and guess, and I don't want you to always be trying to appease me.
Yeah.
I'd rather you say what you want to say.
Yeah.
And
So what I'm hearing is sometimes it's okay to be direct back.
Oh, heck yeah. I don't like
yeah.
beating around the bush
Yeah.
in a conversation with anybody. No.
Yeah.
And I'll say that, things like that to my husband. I'm like, well, what do you think about this paint color? Well, I don't know. Whatever you think. That's not not what I want to know. Want to know what you think about the paint color? Yeah, be direct. I think 8s really appreciate that more than trying to figure out what it is you want us to understand instead of just saying it yourself.
Yeah.
That to me would be the biggest piece of advice I could give anybody. And if the 8 gets angry, point it out to them. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be bossy. Whatever it's your tone, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell them. It's fine.
I think that's helpful insight, and thank you. I want to ask you, is there anything you came today wanting to share that we've not hit that you think might be helpful for folks to hear?
I think we've covered a lot of good information in the 9 ways of knowing, the 9 ways of working book about the Enneagram. I remember reading through the examples of who some Enneagram 8s were, and Saddam Hussein was listed, Hell's Angels, the Mafia. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But just because you're an 8, you're not Saddam Hussein. Don't try to pigeonhole yourself into that, or don't try to resist it because you don't want to be associated with people like that, because there are really good 8s that are out there. I mean, 8s are some of the ones that are making things happen. You got to have them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we're sitting today in the presence of a really great 8. So thanks for being a living example of that, Anne. I'm serious.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah,
I
thank you
appreciate it.
for who you are and for the work that you're doing and for sharing it all with us today.
No, it was fun.
We will keep at this, and in future seasons, we'll do some back and forth with multiple folks on the call at the same time, looking at how types intersect and interact with one another. And so, hopefully, you'll be up for coming back for a return visit sometime soon.
Anytime. Don't hesitate to ask.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us, Anne, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
We hope you are taking away a new learning or insight today, maybe about yourself, someone in your life, or both. If so, time well spent. And if you are ready to explore this work on a more personal level, I invite you to be in touch. Visit us on the web at forwardbound.com. That's FOURWARDBOUND.com. There you can learn more about our coaching and Enneagram education work and schedule yourself for a free of charge discovery call. Finally, we look forward to welcoming you back for another episode of Fourward Bound with the Enneagram very soon. Again, thanks for spending this time with us. Be well.